The Iron Chapel is a fitness podcast where we're going to focus on weightlifting and its benefits. There are definitely going to be other types of exercise and training that I'll cover at different points, but the main focus of this podcast as a whole is going to be weight training. We're going to dive into nutrition, supplements, different styles of weight training, and different styles of training outside of that. In general, most of this podcast is going to be directed toward people who are beginners, just starting in the gym, are people who have been plateaued for a long time and are looking for a way to start making progress again, and directed toward those of you who have been training for a very, very long time and just don't feel like you've gotten the results that you think you should have gotten by this point in your training. Now, my name is Taylor. I guess I didn't really talk about who I am or what even gives me the right to talk about fitness as a whole and what kind of training I have in general. For the last I want to say about 3 years, I've been working with military members, helping them go from failing their PT test to passing their PT test. In general, that's not the most difficult thing in the world because the PT test is made up of a 1.5 mile run, push-up test, and sit-up test. Those are pretty straightforward. However, when I was working with military members on that, one of the things that I focused on was using weights to help them increase their strength so that they could easily do their push-up and sit-up portion of their test. And then we also included cardio so you could get better at the run. Since then, I have moved into a commercial gym where I've worked with all kinds of different individuals, everywhere from the ages of 78 to 18, from people looking to put on muscle and looking to grow, and people who are looking to lose weight. I've worked with people who have just finished having different kinds of surgeries, people who are recovering from injuries, all kinds of different people. And I've really enjoyed working with each of these different types of people. Now, something that every single one of my clients has in common is that at some point we hit a plateau. I did this myself when I first started weight training, and honestly I've done it several times since then. You're either going to hit a plateau in your body weight, in the weights that you're lifting, in the training program that you're doing. Maybe you're just getting tired of what you're doing and you want to try shaking it up with something new. In general, the way that I like to approach plateaus is accepting that it is part of the fitness journey. Usually, I'm going to focus on body weight plateaus specifically at first. So when it comes to body weight plateaus, it might come down to the fact that you're looking at the wrong metric. That maybe the way that you're judging your progress isn't the way that you should be judging your progress. If you were to ask any of my clients, something that I'm insistent on is that they take at least monthly progress pictures. I try to push them to take weekly progress pictures, and I also try to tell them not to weigh themselves any more than once a week. Now, I push more on progress pictures than I do on the scale, because honestly, the scale is a poor measure of your progress in the gym and your health in general. Right now, I currently weigh about 200 pounds, give or take. When I first joined the Air Force, I weighed a whopping 185, so about 15 pounds less than I do now. And I was very, very unhealthy. I was not in a place in my life where I would consider myself at my healthiest. I was working in a pest control company where I was driving routes, and that meant that I stopped at every single gas station, and that's where I would get my lunch, that was where I would get my snacks, and I would snack while I was driving. And even though I walked around quite a bit because I was walking around houses trying to spray them for with the pesticides that we were using, that still wasn't very many steps. In total, I probably did 15 houses. And doing 15 houses when you're walking around that house real fast, maybe inside the house too, I was maybe hitting 8,000 steps a day. But I was spending so much time in the truck. So when I finally joined the Air Force, I was definitely overweight. Now, right here we're looking at a bit of a paradox where I consider myself overweight at 185, but here I am at 200 pounds, and honestly I'm healthier than I've been in a long time. I'm very happy with where I'm at. I'm happy with where I'm at with my lifts. And obviously that's just a case study, but I wanted to use that example to kind of show how the scale is not a good metric. The reality is that if you're in the gym lifting weights, you're probably going to gain weight at some point, and that's because you're putting on muscle. As we make that exchange, as we're putting on muscle and burning body fat, because if we are eating in a caloric deficit and we are increasing our demand for muscular gains, at some point you're going to put on weight. On the flip side, I actually have a client that I'm working with right now who his main goal is to put on muscle because he is thin as a twig, 18 years old, tall, could probably burn off everything he puts in his stomach. Now, this last week when he went to weigh himself, he was down 4 pounds. And so we had kind of go over this conversation from the opposite direction. Because we're hitting a plateau where he's just not eating enough to make up for the energy demands that we are increasing. Because we just changed his workout program so that we're focused more on increasing weights. And we want him to be as strong as possible because really that is his focus. And that's my focus with him. But as we're doing that, he lost a little bit of weight because we're increasing that demand. But I had to explain to him that even though he lost a little bit of weight, we need to focus on the fact that he's still increasing in strength. And that needs to be the metric that we're focusing on, at least until we can break through this initial plateau. Usually that plateau could last anywhere from 1 to 3 months. I've experienced plateaus that have gone on for 6 months where my weight just would not change no matter what I was doing. And that usually means that you are meeting your caloric demands exactly. Whether you've increased that demand by putting on more muscle, increased that demand by walking more, you've threw a little bit more cardio in, you've got a new program that you're trying, and for some reason you're increasing that demand, and for some reason the way you're eating lines up just right with the demand that you're creating. There are a few different ways to break through this plateau. We'll talk about losing weight, and then we'll focus on the other way, because there are people with both goals. When we're on our way down, when we're trying to cut, there's going to be a time where we've dropped the calories down as far as we can get it, and anything lower is honestly going to be too much. At that point, we actually need to focus on taking a break from trying to lose weight, bring those calories back up to about maintenance. I like to sit at just above maintenance and kind of focus on strength for a little bit. As we're building up that strength, we're going to increase your body's demand for calories. What that means is that you will be able to eat more food, and we're actually going to have to increase the calories to stay in that maintenance range. So when it is time for you to start working on that cut again, when we start dropping the calories, we're going to be starting from a higher position. And that way you'll start seeing that weight loss again, and we have room to work down. On the other side, if you're running into an issue where you're having a hard time putting on weight, and no matter what you do, the more you eat, your weight still isn't budging. What we need to do is we need to pull any cardio out. I'm sure that's going to piss some people off. Cardio is good for a lot of things, but if you're trying to put on muscle and you're trying to put on weight and you have struggled for a long time to put on weight, then we need to pull that cardio out for a little bit so that we're decreasing our body's demand for calories. Now, even though we're pulling that cardio out, we still want to make sure that we're eating at that level that we were before. And when you're in a position that you're trying to put on weight like that, honestly, throwing in an extra candy bar isn't going to hurt. And that was my advice to my client, that he is in a position where as long as we are hitting our protein targets, which is really what we need to make sure that we're putting on that muscle, making sure that he's gaining the weight that he wants to gain. As long as we're hitting that protein target, throwing in an extra candy bar is going to just help us push closer to that goal. And that's really what's going to get him to the point that he's making progress again. There are a few different ways outside of that you can break through a plateau. Now, one of the reasons people run into a plateau is because they keep going off and on of a workout program. So at some point we need to be realistic about what we can actually do with that workout program. I had a client, and honestly she was one of my favorite clients to work with, where the only time that she had that she could come to the gym was 30 minutes on a Thursday. There was no other time. We could only do once a week for 30 minutes. So what we did was we did a full body program. We actually had 3 full body workouts that we rotated through. So every 3 weeks we were repeating workouts, but for those 3 weeks we had something different. We worked together probably, I think it was 6 or 7 months, and over that 6 or 7 months, I don't think either of us really noticed much progress. And honestly, she would tell me regularly that she wasn't losing any weight. And I didn't think anything of it. Really, her goal was to become healthier, to enjoy the lifestyle that she was living, but to become stronger so that she could continue to spend time with her children, continue to do the activities that she enjoyed. And as long as our workout program was adding to that, that's all I cared about. Now, fast forward that 6 or 7 months, she comes in and she shows me her progress pictures from the week that we started working together to 7 months later, and the progress was absolutely insane. She had changed so much and so drastically, but her weight hadn't changed at all that whole time. But you could very easily see the change, where she had just been putting on enough muscle to make up for whatever fat she was burning, and that scale did not move at all. And honestly, sometimes being able to keep your body weight the same is a huge win to begin with, especially when we're looking at quality of life. When we get around Thanksgiving, Christmas time, we all know that everyone winds up eating more than they planned. And usually that's about the time that most people see a big change in their body weight, one way or the other, usually toward that adding weight on. But there are ways where, as long as you're staying consistent with your weightlifting and you're prioritizing protein through those holidays, you can actually go through those holidays with very little weight gain, and that, to me, that's a win. Now, back to focusing on how to break out of some of those plateaus. One of the ways that we can break out of a plateau, as I was saying before, is to focus on what we can realistically accomplish and be consistent with. If 1 day a week is all that we can be consistent with, then let's hit that 1 day a week. 1 day a week for 30 minutes, totally achievable. If all we have is 15-20 minutes that we can do 1 day a week, then let's prioritize compound lifts. Let's make sure our nutrition is fairly decent throughout the week. And let's hit that 1 day a week every single week. If you can do 2 days a week, awesome. Let's hit those 2 days a week every single week, because that consistency is what's going to get us through those plateaus. Most of the time, what I've experienced working with clients is the first month, sometimes even 2 months, you don't see any kind of real progress. You see strength increasing in the gym, but you really don't see very many changes in the mirror. And then right around when people would normally give up, just past that is when people start seeing real progress, where they start seeing it in the mirror, where people start complimenting them, start pointing it out. And really that's what I look for, is the people around you noticing that change, because they're going to notice it before you do. We are our worst critics. We are always going to see the worst in ourselves. And when we look in the mirror, sometimes we see a version of ourselves that just doesn't exist anymore. And it's good to pay attention to what people around us say. If people around us are noticing changes, then we need to start looking for those changes too. Once we've developed that consistency, whether it's 1 time a week, 2 times a week, 3 times a week, if you're the kind of person that works in the gym or your job demands physical fitness, then we need to start pushing into 5 times a week, 6 times a week. I will never recommend 7 times a week because there should always be some kind of rest day. Now, this program does not have to consist entirely of weightlifting. I have a preference toward weightlifting, and I like my program to be a majority of weightlifting, but even my program right now contains a little bit of weightlifting, a little bit of mobility. I'm playing soccer on the weekends. I'm going snowboarding when I can while the mountain is still has snow. And we need to remember that things outside of the gym are also fitness. So like right now I'm on an indoor soccer team with a bunch of friends. Part of fitness is also spending that time with friends, but also being able to keep up on the soccer team, which I am not the best at. That is an area of fitness that I'm still working on, because I've spent so much time working on the weights that I'm not as good when it comes to keeping up for the whole game. Now, once we run into that plateau and we keep pushing, we stay consistent, sometimes it's a good idea to look at our goals and decide whether or not they're realistic. We've all heard the term SMART goals. Honestly, I don't think that's a good way to look at goals. And when it comes to fitness goals, I think there are several different approaches that we can take for those fitness goals, because our fitness goals are always going to include multiple approaches. They're going to include our workout program, nutrition, supplementation, and just what we want to be able to accomplish in life. That last bucket is going to take up most of our time. Whether it's work, family, friends, that is going to take up and affect the rest of these 3 buckets. Daily supplementation is not going to be a thing if we have our kitchen set up in a way where we're constantly forgetting to take supplements, where we're constantly being distracted by family duties that pull us away from it. Not saying that it's bad to have family duties. However, we need to kind of organize our life in a way that we'll remember to do those things daily, if that's something that we want to include in there. Nutrition is going to be difficult if we have a spouse or a significant other that does not want to eat the way that we want to eat. If we have someone that's constantly bringing junk food into the house, that's going to make it so much more difficult to make those decisions for ourselves. We need to make sure that we're on the same page with the other people that are in our house, or that we're willing to make a sacrifice in that area. And sometimes we have to make trade-offs where most of our diet is on point and we make sacrifices where we need to make sure that we don't harm those relationships. And then our workout program, some people just aren't going to have time for an hour or 2 hours 3 or 4 times a week. 30 minutes 2-3 times a week, you're still going to see progress. 30 minutes once a week, you're going to see progress. What that means, though, is that progress will be drawn out, that it will take longer to get to the point that you want to get to. And that's the same with all 3 of those buckets, whether we're looking at workout program, nutrition, or supplementation. The more we pull from those buckets, the longer it's going to take us to get to our goals. So we need to decide what our overarching goal is. For myself, I want to be as strong as I possibly can. Each of these buckets are going to add to that goal. And I'm going to set a timeline based on how much I can actually put into those 3. Being realistic with myself, knowing that when I start pushing toward that 6 times a week, I am terrible at being consistent with that. That 6th day, I always miss. I've tried 6 days a week several times, and every time I get to that 6th day, I miss. Something happens during the week, and I'm just unable to make all 6 days. 4 days a week, perfect. I can do 4 days a week every single week. 3 days a week is almost too little for me, where I spend enough time in the gym because usually I'm coaching clients throughout the week, where 3 days a week feels like I'm wasting time when I'm already in the gym. 4 days a week is perfect for me, though. When it comes to nutrition, I like to be able to go eat out with friends, and so I make decisions at home that let me have that flexibility when I go out with friends, where I don't have to worry about the types of food that I'm eating once I'm going out. But even when I'm going out, I'm prioritizing protein. I try to reduce the amount of carbs and fats that I eat when I'm going out because, in general, fast food is already high in those. And so I just try to make sure that I'm eating more protein when I'm out like that. And then finally, my daily supplementation. I have my supplements set up for each day of the month, ready to go, so that it's super easy for me to just grab. I take it with me to the gym. Right before I hit my workout, I take my supplements for my creatine and for my para-workout drink. I have that for my workout so that I'm always remembering it. It's a little bit harder for me to remember when I'm not working out at the gym. So I have to actively make sure that I set that up first thing in the morning so I don't forget it later. For this week, what I want you to focus on is looking at what your actual overarching goal is and setting one that you can approach from these 3 different angles. We're going to tear down the idea of a SMART goal, and we're going to look at what being fit this year means to you, whether that's becoming stronger, whether that's losing weight, whether that's putting on more muscle, putting on more size. We're going to look at how we can align those 3 buckets